Evening everyone, it's Pavi with another video. When I woke up this morning, I wasn't expecting to do a video today, but due to the sensational news really that WADA are going to appeal the exoneration of the ITIA of ITIA Sinner for failing 2 drug tests earlier this year, I have no option really but to jump on here, do a quick video. I said quick, they're never really quick, but a video to try and digest exactly what's happened today, why it's happened, and what is going to happen going forward. Now, the first thing that I need to talk about is that WADA appealing the ITIA decision is sensational. So the reason why it's sensational is that back in the day, WADA used to kind of control all of the anti-doping programs in every single sport. They were known as the flagship industry that would had the resources and technology and the finances to kind of do this the right way and the proper way. And they were known to be the #1 agency in terms of anti-doping protocols. Now, a few years ago, because of the amount of resource that it takes to kind of do that for every single sport, there were some sports that they decided to outsource their protocols to, and tennis was one of them. So they decided to kind of liaise with tennis. So, and when I talk about tennis, I'm talking about the ATP, WTA, the slams, the ITF, all of the organizations that are involved in tennis, to say, listen, we've got an opportunity for you to kind of take this program forward. And, if you can come back to us and say that you've got an agency that is going to follow our guidelines and continue to monitor anti-doping programs in a rigorous and thorough manner, then, we're happy to have that conversation with you. So, so obviously tennis said, yeah, absolutely fine. We're happy to do that. And then they decided to finance what was initially known as the TIA, and that became the ITIA in 2022. And from January the 1st, 2022, the ITIA was responsible for all of the anti-doping procedures and protocols that take place in tennis. And they were funded, which is quite a key point really, they were funded by tennis itself. So they were funded by the ATP, the WTA, the ITF, and all of the 4 Grand Slams. So they would kind of all combine to give the funding to this ITIA, which was formed just over 2 years ago, and they have sole responsibility. Now, I've kind of mentioned this a couple of times and I've alluded to it in that I didn't think that WADA would intervene in a decision made by the ITIA. Because if they did, it meant that WADA were not happy at all with the processes and the due diligence and the research and the ultimately the decisioning that they made with regards to the ITIA Sinner case. So them doing this and getting involved is unprecedented, because it creates a big issue now with WADA and with tennis, because WADA are essentially saying, we don't believe that the ITA acted in the protocols that we'd kind of set to them and guidelines. And that is a big issue, because that raises huge question marks now over the future of the ITIA. And obviously WADA will more than likely now be reviewing that relationship that it has with tennis, and it's a multi-million-pound relationship. The turnover for the ITIA in 2023 was nearly 20 million. And I've got that information from Companies House, which is public information, and I'm interested to see what sort of turnover they did this year. So it's a multi-million business. So this is embarrassing, not only for the ITIA, but for the whole of tennis, really, because the ATP, WTA, all the slams are financing this company, and essentially WADA, who are known as the #1 agency in terms of the anti-doping protocols, have basically said, we don't agree with a decision that you have made. So that today is in itself probably merits a video, because it's sensational. It's unprecedented, and for them to kind of do that, they must have really looked at the report and just thought there's loads of things happened here that shouldn't have happened, and inconsistencies, coincidences, due process was not followed, essentially, is what WADA are saying. Now, what WADA have said is that, they are pushing for a suspension for Yannick Sinner for between 1 to 2 years, which is what they believe the penalty is if a player or a player's team, in which case, we refer to his fitness coach and his physio, did have a level of negligence in what they were doing. So the ITIA found that there was no negligence or fault on Yannick Sinner or his team. So they believe that what they did was not being done intentionally. And the key thing is they also didn't think that what they did was being negligible or negligent, sorry. So those were the key points really that came from this decision-making process. Now, as I said, when I first saw the 33-page report, my first reading, and normally your first reading is normally the best idea, I just looked at it and thought, this story doesn't make sense at all. There were so many holes in it, and the actual story when I was reading it, and I thought, this does not make sense. And that was backed up because I was getting messages from actual physios of tennis players that said, because I initially I tweeted it straight away, and I thought, this is BS. I don't believe the story. Now, I've never kind of said, and I still don't believe whether Sinner is an intentional doper or not, but the story that was concocted, I felt was dubious, and it needed further investigations. And I'm going to quickly gloss over why I think it was dubious. But the obvious one for me is that it seemed very, very reckless. So you've got Humberto Ferreira, who is said in the tribunal, has been told he's a highly experienced fitness coach. But not only that, he was an experienced and qualified pharmacist, and he was actually in charge of Yannick Sinner's anti-doping procedures. So he would check Yannick's medicines, he would check any substances that he was using, he would check his food to make sure there was no chance at all of him ever having any sort of banned substance that may result in a drug test showing as positive for a banned substance. So this guy is very, very experienced. Now, the story that we were told is that he decided to buy a cream, trifluoromoral, I think is how you pronounce it. The pronunciation is not important at this stage, but that cream contained a banned substance called clestebol. Now, clestebol in the last few years has been used prominently, particularly in Italy, by a number of athletes, and there's been a number of suspensions. So it's a very well-known product that is causing a lot of athletes to have failed drugs tests in Italy. And the benefits of clostebol is that they're twofold. It increases muscle mass, but it also increases physical endurance. So essentially, that's the reason why it's banned. It gives an unfair advantage if you take this product over the rest of the players that obviously are not taking this product. So the first alarm bell that really rang out for me was that this guy, we've been told he's very, very experienced as a pharmacist. Why did he take a spray that he knew, because it was clearly documented on the labeling, but he would also know, as being a pharmacist, that this contained clostebol? And this is someone that we've been told is checking all the ingredients of everything, because he is in charge of Yannick Sinner. So he decides to take this spray, which was allegedly bought in a pharmacist in Bologna, I believe, in February. But he decided to take this spray to the USA. Now, this is a big problem here, because in the USA, this spray is banned unless there is what's the word I'm looking for? A prescription that is given by a doctor. So it's it's for serious medical conditions. Now, we know that at the time that that Ferreira got the spray, Giacomo Rinaldi, the physio, who was alleged to then use the spray, didn't even have his cut. So he wouldn't have had a prescription for something that hadn't happened yet. So basically he took this product into the US full well knowing that it wasn't allowed there, and he has taken that into the US of A. Now, a number of discrepancies now continue with this story, because they were saying that Nardi cut his little finger on an open scalpel that he left in a medical bag. So that, first of all, that's negligent. Nardi is a physio, he's a healthcare professional, and to leave an open scalpel in your medical bag is reckless. But the other issue is on the report, one of Sinner's friends who travelled with them to Miami was interviewed, and he said that the injury happened not from an open scalpel, it was something else. So automatically there's a discrepancy there, and he wasn't cross-examined, and they just thought it was a discrepancy, and maybe he forgot or got confused, and they kind of brushed over that. So you've got to remember here, WADA are looking at all of this information. They would have looked at the history of Ferreira. They would have seen that he was a fitness coach of Philippe Volondri, who is now the Italian Davis Cup captain, who also was banned for a few months for using a banned substance, for using an inhaler more than he should have done. So the fitness trainer then was Umberto Ferreira. They would have looked at his credentials and said, look, he's an experienced pharmacist. He's, obviously very, very talented at what he does. So how would he be so reckless to take this spray to the US? Now, the most reckless thing that he's done, upon finding that Nardi apparently has cut his finger so badly that he needs this magic spray, he gives that spray to Nardi full well aware that Nardi was massaging Yannick Sinner daily, and fully aware that Yannick Sinner apparently has psoriasis and had kind of holes in his legs and feet, or whatever it may be. So you would think that this spray shouldn't be anywhere near Yannick Sinner at all, because he knows it's a banned substance. He then gives that spray to Nardi and explains to Nardi that this is a banned substance, so just be careful if you're going to be using it anywhere near Yannick. Nardi apparently forgot the warning message because he had jet lag and some personal problems, so he completely was oblivious to it, and then decided to use the spray for 8 consecutive days, which coincided with when Sinner obviously failed the drug test. So it seems quite a convenient story. Now, the other thing that the WADA would have looked at is that Stefano Battaglino, I believe his name was found to have the exact same banned substance just a few months earlier, clostebol. Now, what excuse did Stefano give for the reason for having clostebol in his system? You're not going to believe this, but he also said it was from a massage given by a physio. But in this instance, it was a tournament physio. So obviously lower rank players don't have enough income for their own physios and fitness coaches to travel with them in tournaments. So they rely on tournament physios. But it was the exact excuse given. The ITIA looked at this and they didn't believe his story and thought it's too far-fetched. How is that going to happen? Even though it said the amount of clostebol was insignificant. So it was a very, very small amount, not an amount that you would think would enhance your performance. But that is another issue, in that the amount here doesn't matter really, because it could be used as a masking agent. We've already had an ex-Portuguese WADA director that has said that clostebol can be used as a masking agent. The other issue is that we don't know how long it was in the system. So had they tested before, would it have been a lot more? We don't know. We don't know what levels of testing was done prior to Yannick Sinner's tests in March. So I think when people say, oh, it's less than a gram, a milligram, or whatever it is, that's inconsequential. This is something that you shouldn't have in your system, period. it's a banned substance. It's a well-known bad substance, particularly in Italy. And Yannick Sinner, Italian himself, would have known of the issue. And more importantly, his physio and fitness coach would have known, because his physio was also involved in the Bologna basketball team as a physio, where there was a player that was also banned for the use of clostebol. So again, WADA would be looking at all this information and thinking, hang on, what is going on here? So, they would have looked at the story and it didn't quite make sense. And the other thing is if you cut your finger for 8 days, you need treatment for 8 days, you would normally go and get some stitches done. If it was a really bad cut, you'd go to stitches. Miami Masters is in a new venue. They talk about how high tech it is, and it's got some of the best facilities, medical facilities, best resources, one of the best Masters facilities in the whole world. So, why would Ferreira need to bring a spray from Italy when you've got all the best resources in the world in this tournament? And B, if that cut was so bad for Nardi, why did he not get stitches? Why did he not get stitches and so resume? But he carried on, and more importantly, he stated that he didn't wear any protective gloves. So he had an open wound and he was massaging Yannick Sinner, who he knew had psoriasis. And he's an experienced healthcare professional. So, there's red flags that would be ringing from anyone reading this report that had that was reading this independently, it would have raised eyebrows. So this was all, the stuff that I was reading and thinking, well, what has gone on here? Now, after the tests have been found and been represented to Sinner that he's failed not just one, but 2 separate drug tests. So these weren't sample A and sample B. There were 2 separate drug tests, and on both occasions there was clostebol found in Yannick Sinner's system. They decide then to go and try and get this decision overturned. And basically they hire lawyers that they worked with, and they wanted the ITIA to keep the decision private. So, they didn't want it out in the public, because in Darren Cahill's words is that if people didn't have the context, then it wouldn't look good. And we now have that context, and it doesn't look good. The story that they've given is basically, for me, is showing negligence. And if it showed negligence, then Yannick Sinner, according to the rules and regulations, the guidelines that WADA provide and ITIA are supposed to enforce, should have then resulted in a suspension for Yannick Sinner, because it doesn't matter if he was reckless. He hires his teams. They're his team. He has said that he is loyal to a T, and he recruits the people that he trusts and works with. So regardless of the fact whether he was intentionally doping or not, he has hired 2 professionals that have made a number of errors which have resulted in him being positive for a banned substance. So this then essentially goes to the ITIA, and they, unprecedented really, decide to listen to Yannick Sinner's lawyers and decide to keep the matter private within a couple of days. And that also meant that they allowed him to continue to play in events, even though he had just failed 2 drug tests. Now, the big issue that a lot of tennis players and the tennis industry had is that we've had a number of players that have said, we don't know how this, that have failed, similar to Yannick Sinner, have said, we haven't done this, we don't know where the source is, we don't know how we got contaminated. And the ITIA have said, tough, we're going to suspend you pending an investigation. And that investigation could be weeks, months, years away. But with Yannick Sinner, they didn't do that. So this is something that WADA would have had a look and thought, well, why haven't they done that with Yannick Sinner? And I can tell you why. Is because Yannick Sinner was days away from becoming the first Italian to get to the world #1 in tennis. This is a player that has been backed by big organisations. He's one of Nike's biggest ever sponsorships, $100 million plus deal that he signed with them. Prada, Gucci, Rolex. And Rolex is quite important because Rolex are a key sponsor of tennis. They sponsor a lot of the ATP events, including the Masters, who also funds the ITIA, the ATP. Now, you can imagine the embarrassment that these organizations would have that have been pushing Sinner as a role model. He's on every billboard in every country. He is being pushed as this kind, sincere, honest tennis player with integrity who was just about to become the world number one. Can you imagine the uproar and the embarrassment that they would then have to say is, yeah, he's just failed 2 tests for a performance-enhancing drug? It wouldn't have looked very, very good. So WADA would have been looking at all of this information. Now, another bit of information that they would have been looking at closely is that Yannick Sinner and his team decided to hire a lawyer called Kendra Potts for sporting resolution or on-site law, I believe it is. It's a legal firm in London. Now, the issue that, well, what I think was maybe not an issue or a red flag is that Kendra Potts actually represented the ITIA when they were going in a case against Tara Moore for exactly the same reason, for having a banned performance-enhancing substance in her blood that she denied from day one and was later exonerated because it was due to, I believe, some meat that was contaminated with this banned substance in South America, which has happened to a number of players. But Kendra Potts was then representing the ITIA in trying to kind of prosecute, or kind of punish, is probably the better word, Tara Moore for failing these tests. She's now on the other side of the fence. So she's now almost kind of, challenging ITIA and saying, oh, actually, no, my client is, it's legitimate. It's, his story is plausible. So she would know every single one of what the ITIA look at. So, not only is it a conflict of interest, it's the fact that she knows a lot more information. So you must think, well, Yannick Sinner's got probably the best resources out of any tennis players, and he's picked these lawyers that they would have known that have actually worked on the other side. So again, WADA would have been looking at that, and it wouldn't have been making any sense at all. So, the reason that I was so kind of, raising my voice on this almost on a daily matter is that I've read the same report. I saw the errors that were made, or the story for me didn't make any sense. It had holes in it. The conflict of interest didn't make any sense. Why ITIA, who had the opportunity to publicise this information as they would for any other player in May, refused to do so? And at the same time, Yannick Sinner is being promoted almost daily. He's the world number one. He's the greatest player. It's the Sinner era. Everything is about Yannick Sinner. And it begs me to ask the question is that, at what point did the ATP know? At what point did Andre Ganassi know? And why was this kept a secret? So these are more points, but you delve more into the case and you think, okay, well, where is the interviews from the people that were involved? So Nardi, Ferreira, there's been silence from them. So it almost feels that there's been NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, that they've been forced to sign, that they're unable to speak about this. So WADA would have had a look into that as well. WADA would have had a look into the fact that during the report, there wasn't no bank statements seen for the physio and the tournament, the fitness coach. Because if there was large payments that went into the bank statements, they could have said, well, what's happening here? Have they been given money to present this story? But according to the tribunal, none of their bank statements was ever requested for. That is something that I personally, if I was working on a tribunal, is something that I would have had a look just to cover all bases. We're not saying it was definitely corrupt, but if you get bank statements of 2 people that are testifying against something, saying that it was their fault why the player that they were kind of being a physio to and a fitness coach failed a drug test, you would want to see their bank statements to make sure there was no large payments, just to kind of discount any wrongdoings there. That was not done as well. So this is something that that WADA would have been looking at as well. They also would have been suspicious with the fact that Sinner was allowed to continue to play in event after an event, even prior to a decision being made. Now, that is unprecedented as well. We've seen with Simona Halep and Tara Moore, suspended straight away, pending investigation. Now, in both of Simona Halep and Tara Moore's cases, you would see that, in the end, they've both taken their cases forward and appealed their decision, and they've actually overcome them. And but they've still had to face that time off. They've never had that time off. Tara Moore was off for, I think, 18 months. And this is a lower ranked player. She had no one to pay her bills. She's still got loved ones to provide for. She's still got bills to pay. She was, suspended from the game for 18 months. Simona Halep was suspended for over a year as well. And again, she denied any knowledge of how the performance-enhancing drug was found in a system similar to Sinner. So WADA are saying, well, why have they believed Yannick Sinner's story when it is not clear-cut in any way, shape, or form? But for other players, they've suspended straight away. So there's a lot of red flags here, and some people are saying, oh, this is due to you raising the awareness. WADA aren't stupid. They're not mugs. They would have had a team that would have had a look at all of this and would have questioned it. And the most important thing is WADA are not financed by tennis. So when ITIA are looking at this, they will fully be aware that they are funded, their wages are being paid by tennis. That's a key point here, because there's no conflict of interest from WADA anymore. They're not funded by tennis. And ITIA are. So there's a lot of red flags that are happening here. The other red flag, really, and this is something that I've been talking about quite a lot, is the lack of accountability. So people will remember famously, I think, Maria Sharapova, when she was told that she had been using a substance which was only recently made banned. So, previously it was perfectly acceptable, but she'd misread an email which said that it was no longer acceptable, and her and the team missed that. She did a press conference and said, look, I've made a mistake. This wasn't intentional, but I'm being open with you and transparent with you, and I will answer all the questions that you have for me. And the press conference was full of media, of journalists, and they asked her a number of questions, and she answered all of them. Now, Yannick Sinner, in a statement today, is saying he's had nothing to hide, and he's innocent, and the ITA have checked him thoroughly. If he had nothing to hide, why at the time, because he was told on the 2nd of April, why did he not hold a press conference then to say, listen, this is what's happened. I've been found, I've had 2 drug tests that have been found to have a very small trace of a banned substance called clestable in it. I completely deny all of these kind of allegations or the results, because I have never intentionally taken this product, and I have been contaminated in some way. I don't know which way, but I'm going to fight for my innocence. And, in the meantime, I'm likely to be suspended from the game, but I'm going to fight and I'm going to prove that I was right. Okay. Now, had he done that, I wouldn't have had a problem, and none of the tennis world would have had a problem. And most importantly, WADA wouldn't have had a problem, because they would have said, right, he's being transparent. He's had a press conference. He would have answered questions, and he would have taken questions, and he would have admitted that there was an issue, and he's being fully transparent. So that counts for a lot. He didn't do any of that. He didn't not only do it then, he didn't even do a press conference when he was actually found clear. So you would have thought he would have had a press conference to talk about everything and the process, take questions. He did none of that. He did none of that even when he returned, and I found that completely outstanding, really astonishing, that he did not want to do a press conference to kind of clear his name and explain his side of the story. So that is another red flag that WADA would have been looking at. The other thing that WADA would have been looking at is, where is the ATP in all this? This is your world #1 player who's failed 2 drug tests, for taking a banned substance that improves your performance. There was absolute silence. All we had from the ATP was one page statement on the day that he was found innocent to say Yannick Sinner went through this, and there was no name to it. There was no Andre Gadenzi, who's an Italian chairman, who is the kind of voice of the ATP and the face of the ATP. Nothing. And there's been nothing from him since. No press conference, no people answering the questions. Where's the accountability? Where was the ITIA press conference? Nothing. They took their comments off their pages so people couldn't comment and they wouldn't respond back. Is that showing a level of arrogance? What is happening here? Because this hasn't happened. It's unprecedented, really, that someone in any sport fails 2 drug tests, not just 1, 2, and is allowed to continue playing until, decisions made. It's absolutely insane. But even despite all of this, I still thought that WADA would not get involved, because if they did, it would compromise their relationship with tennis, which it is now done. So, it is a big thing. Now, the final point that I want to discuss is the tennis media's kind of complicity in this. And they were determined to keep this silent. You look at all of the media. People will refer back to me as being a Djokovic fan. This has got nothing to do with being a Djokovic fan. I couldn't care less if Sinner beat him in the Australian Open. I couldn't care less if he became the world number 1. Djokovic has completed tennis for me. He's given me so much joy and happiness, and it's been an absolute honour supporting him, and I'll continue supporting him, because not only is he the greatest player in the world, but he's a good man with good principles, and I know that by everything that he does on and off court. So this has got nothing to do with that. Djokovic is 37 now. He's not going to stay number 1. I'm not that obsessed that I want him to be number 1, and anyone that takes over, I'm going to target. That's complete BS. We know that, Djokovic has told us many times that he's now going to really reduce his playing schedule, which is understandable. He's going to focus primarily on slams and focus on team events. He might do the odd masters here and there, but he's going to tone his schedule right down, which means that he's unlikely to ever become world number 1 again. Absolutely no problem with that. He's got the most weeks at number 1 ever. So, I have got absolutely no issue with that. So it's nothing to do with Djokovic. But what I will say is that I'm talking about the media again. In 2022, when Djokovic would not take the COVID vaccine and was unbelievably and shockingly deported from Australia as a result, he had all the media constantly asking questions. Oh, he's filled in the wrong immigration form. Why is he not getting vaccinated? Why has he got an exemption? He said he had COVID. Did he really have COVID? We're going to check. You had journalists ringing Serbian hospitals. You had them hounding the family, the house. It was horrific for them. And this is all because he didn't take a brand new drug. Now, the very same journalists are being silent. Not a single one of them have said, we've looked at that report, but we don't believe it. And we all know why. Because they are all tied into the establishment. They know where they get their wages from. They don't want to upset the apple cart. Because if they do, they'll be out of a job. Simple as that. This is how it works in tennis. So, and you've got people that good people in the media that are telling me this, but they don't want to say it publicly because they know that they will lose job opportunities if they do. And I can understand that. But for me, I've always thought, the way I've been brought up and my faith tells me that you've got to do the right thing. It doesn't matter. You can't be intimidated. We've had people like John Wertheim and Bastian Funchen trying to get piled on to me, trying to get people to intimidate me, and I've had threats, abuse, but I will stand up, I'll stand tall, and I'll do something that is the right thing to do. And that's nothing to do with Djokovic, it's to do with the fact that I'm passionate about the sport that I love, that has given me so much over the years, playing it, running a tennis club, watching tennis. Tennis is a very, very important part of my life, but so is fairness, integrity, having a level playing field for everyone, regardless if you're ranked number 1 or 1,000. That is very, very passionate for me. It's helping those that are in need is very, very very, very important principles that I would always kind of work with. And it's something that I get inspiration from Djokovic, because I know he feels exactly the same way. So this isn't about anything other than doing the right thing. It's not an agenda against Yannick Sinner. It's not an agenda against any particular player. It's an agenda against a system that I believe is corrupt. And I believe now is the time where people are finally opening their eyes, because I've had so many messages to say from people to say, you know, we thought you were a conspiracist, we thought you were toxic, because this is the messages that have been coming out from people like Andy Roddick, who have tried to cancel me, John Wortham, who have tried to cancel me, numerous others that have tried to cancel me, even the ATP have blocked me. You know, there's a lot of organisations that don't want my voice out there because they're afraid that people will find out the truth. And that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. And now the media have been exposed for being complicit with trying to cover this up. If this was Novak Djokovic, they would be absolutely hammering him. And everyone knows that. Everyone in tennis knows that would be the case. And they would be hounding him for months and months and months. You know, this was Yannick Sinner. They didn't do anything. And you know, people were threatening me to say, oh, you know, you're going to be sued for not letting up. You know, what? For asking questions, for asking for justice. It's, you know, it's completely, you know, the level of abuse and toxicity is unbelievable. But when you get that level of abuse, that's when you know you're close to the truth. So it almost gives you some sort of pleasure to think, actually, yeah, I'm ruffling some feathers here, and they are worried because they know what I'm saying is the truth, and they don't want that truth to come out. So WADA would have had a look at all of this information, and that is when they have come to this conclusion. Now, what is going to happen next? What is going to happen next is that CAS, the Court Arbitration of Sport, are likely now to do a brand new investigation. So they will get their own industry experts in to have a look at the information that's been already provided by Yannick Sinner and his team. They are likely to re-interview the key people in this, the whole process. So they'll interview Sinner, they'll interview Cahill, they'll interview, you know, the other coach, they'll interview Naldi, they'll interview Ferreira, and they will get a new set of industry experts, I would imagine, that will then look at the information provided. And I just hope that some of those industry experts are a physio themselves, someone who's involved in tennis, so they can actually look and say, does this marry up? And essentially what WADA are saying is that they feel that there was some negligence on behalf of Yannick Sinner's team in terms of how the cluster ball even got into Yannick Sinner's system. And if that is the case, then the standard punishment for that is a ban for 1 to 2 years. So that's basically what WADA is going to be pushing. CAS are going to be having working with WADA and having a look at that, and they'll probably look at a new investigation. It's probably going to take 3 or 4 months. Not ideal, particularly not ideal if you're Yannick Sinner, but this is essentially what's happened because the case initially was hidden. Had Yannick Sinner spoken out and you know, had the ITIA suspended him as they should have done until he was free, this wouldn't have been an issue. So you know, there's no one really to blame here apart from Sinner and his team. But it's going to be a difficult few months now. I don't know what I would do if I was in Sinner's case here. Then you know, they've already, you know, it's difficult if there is a lie. You find out you do one lie and you end up doing more and more lies until it all goes wrong. If it's the truth, then I think, you know, they'll stick with their story and they hope that the new panel will agree with the ITIA. But WADA essentially have had a look at it. You know, they would have been looking at it in great amount of detail. They've got a very, very talented and experienced team there. And they've come to the conclusion that Yannick Sinner should have been penalised, and even if they're not saying it's his fault, they were saying that his team should have borne some negligence for their actions. So that's going to basically what happens in the next few months. My main focus is not going to be on Yannick Sinner. You know, as I said, you know, before this, I thought he was, I still do. I think he's a nice guy. You know, I briefly met him at Wimbledon in the summer. I've got absolutely nothing against him. He seems a nice guy. And he may have made a mistake. You know, I don't know. I don't know whether he knew what was happening or whether this was his team that was doing it, or whether, you know, it is just, you know, recklessness. And you know, whether it's the latter, you still, you know, if you make mistakes, you have to deal with the consequences, and actions have consequences, and you know, they're going to have to deal with that. But yeah, I hope he's got a good team around him, and they will support and rally around him, and you know, he's got a close-knit group of people there that I know will help him, support him through this time, because it is going to be difficult for him. there is going to be that scrutiny that that he should have had in the last few months, but he will get that now. And we will then await the result. I believe the result will be around the kind of January. They've said maybe 3 months. So, around the time of Australian Open 2025 is when he's likely to get that decision. They've told him that he's able to continue playing until that outcome is done, and then possibly is facing a ban of 1 to 2 years. So it might be a year, 18 months, or 2 years, depending on whether they find they agree with WADA, and then it will become down to the sentencing that I believe the Court Arbitration of Sport will administer. So that's kind of where we are now. What I'm going to do is going to continue talking about corruption in tennis. I think that it needs a shakedown. I think now is a great time for the PTPA to really stand up, get its members as much as possible, and then if necessary, players are going to have to start, even looking at doing something radical like striking in certain tournaments, because at the moment the ATP and WTA are unwilling to relinquish any power to or decision making process to the PTPA. And they're not being transparent with everything, and the PTPA have requested for a lot of information, and the ATP and WTA are not playing ball, so it's going to be a challenge. But if the players want a fair and equal sport that's level on and off court for everyone, then they're going to have to really fight for their rights here and fight for what is theirs. So I'm going to continue highlighting that, and obviously keeping close tabs with what's happening. I don't think there's going to be a lot happening now in the next few weeks or months. I think the investigations will take place, and we'll have to see what results from that. But yeah, that's me. I'm going to sign off. I just really wanted to thank everyone that supported me and defended me. I've not got involved in a lot of conversations, but I know everyone that's out there that's really been behind me, even though everyone's trying to paint me as this monster and some sort of psycho, which everyone who knows me will know that I'm completely not that person. So thanks for everyone that have stood by me, and I appreciate. I am going against the establishment narrative, so I'm going to get a load of heat, and loads of people that were going to try and intimidate me to be silent, and that is what happens. But as I said, I want justice to be served, and just for everyone to be treated equally in tennis, and what I would like to see really is the resignations of the ATP CEO Andre Gadensi, and also the CEO of the ITIA, Karen Moorfield, Karen Morehouse or Moorfield. I'll have to Google that and check it. But I think their positions are untenable now, because they were in charge of treating this case in a way that would have that the WADA would have expected. There would have been a minimum kind of requirement for them to do that. They failed to do that, so I don't know how their positions are tenable, and I don't know how the ITIA are going to recover from this going forward. But I think it's going to be interesting times in tennis. I think a lot of the players are waking up, a lot of the fans are waking up. I've had so many messages from people that say they normally don't agree with me, and that I've been proven right more than once now on a few issues, and they can see that there is that the tennis media that present themselves as holier than holy, and that they tell the truth, are not actually telling the truth, and they are basically doing what their bosses want them to do, essentially, people who pay their bosses. So thanks for everyone's support. As I said, it's I think it's a big scandal in tennis. And it's the system at fault here, as opposed to Yannick Sinner. I think Yannick Sinner's been badly advised here by certain members of his team, and as I said, he seems a nice guy, and I hope he can recover and overcome a tough part in his life, and wish him well, and hopefully a lot of the media will kind of get some grief as well, because I think they're complicit in what's happened, not just with Sinner now, but with everything that's happened in tennis in the last few years. So yeah, 45 minutes. It is a little bit of a long one. I'll try and keep them less than 40 minutes, but it's gone over today, but it's understandable. So yeah, peace out, take care. Look after everyone, and yeah, let's all work together to try and make tennis a sport that we all love and follow, to be equal, fair, and that everyone is treated the same. Okay, take care, peace out, stay blessed, everyone.